Hey guys, it's Amy from Artful Artsy Amy, and I'm here to tell you all about the very awesome Skittle project. The first thing I want you to know about the Skittle project is where it came from. About 3 years ago, Ian Sands, who writes over at Art of Apex, did a project with Skittles and portraits with his high school students, and I thought, oh my god, that's so cool. And then for Gish West, which is the big scavenger hunt I do every year, we had to make a portrait of Jensen Ackles' face from Supernatural, and one of my teammates did that, and I thought, I want to do it! So 3 years later, I had the opportunity because I was asked to be a camp counselor for my school's STEAM camp, and it was the week after school got out. Nobody wants to go work at a camp the week after school gets out. We're exhausted, right? So I said, yeah, I'll do it, but I want a really big budget. And they said, sure. And I thought, sometimes you gotta play a little hardball, right? So I had a very, very big budget, and I had the opportunity to do this project, which I've been dying to do for 3 years, and I'm so psyched to get to share it with you today. The first thing you really need to know about this project is that you have to pre-plan. There's a tremendous amount of pre-planning. I have some notes over here, so I'm kind of looking at them. The first thing is you really need to know how many portraits is your class going to create, okay? And I found best that it worked well for middle schoolers to work in groups of 3 or 4. The good size for these portraits is about 2 foot to 2 foot, and that works well for the level of pixelation you'll have for an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper printout. I recommend buying the 41-ounce size bags of Skittles because that's the most cost-effective method of doing that, and they kind of average between $7 to $11 a bag. And I did a little bit of math, and a 41-ounce bag of Skittles has approximately 1,120 Skittles in it, which is a lot. And the average 2 foot by 2 foot Skittles portrait takes 2,304 Skittles. So that can kind of already tell you that you're going to average, just in Skittle cost, probably about $14 a portrait, just for the sake of your budget. The next part of the pre-planning that is really, really important is deciding how you're going to do it. Is your whole class going to be making Skittle portraits at the same time? You could do that. I would probably have a heart attack and die. That would be way too much candy and kids and stuff happening. So what I recommend doing is having 2 to 3 groups working on the Skittles portrait, and then have the rest of the class involved in a project that has a pretty high level of self-drive or self-efficacy, where they kind of know what's going on, so you can float back and forth between those 2 groups. And that seemed to work best in my class. So let's say that you have the Skittles and you're ready to get this thing going with the kids. What are you gonna do? The first thing that you want to do is you want to get all of your Skittles sorted by color. This is going to save you epic amounts of time in the long run, and it sounds really tedious, but you always have those kids who just like want to do something, or they come in early, or they're bored or whatever, and they'll sort Skittles for you. And hey, maybe you have to bribe them, maybe you have to say, I'll let you eat 10 Skittles if you sort the rest, whatever. Let them do it, okay? Get those things sorted. So you want to introduce this project to the students, and this project has a ton of connections, okay? This is the perfect project for STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So if you're looking for a STEAM project to really show off to that engineering teacher at your school what can happen, this is it. All right, so first of all, you've got math components because you're using grids, you're having to count out Skittles, that kind of stuff. You have science components because you're talking about color theory. You're also talking about pixelation. That's in technology integration. The technology and the science is involved together there. Okay, and then finally, it has art applications with pop art, with modern art. You can talk about themes. Trayvon Martin, who's the young man who was killed about 2 years ago now, there have been a lot of portraits made of him out of Skittles because that was one of the items that was on his body. So those are all things that you can think about when you introduce it. The way I introduced it is I talked about 8-bit art and the history of 8-bit art, which the kids love because they've been looking at 8-bit art their whole lives. They just don't know it, right? So we talk about that, and then we talk about how we're going to pixelate the image. A lot of you guys saw me posting on Instagram and Twitter and Tumblr, and you were asking me, like, how do you get that pixelated image, right? So I took mine into Pixlr because we're all about the free at my school, but you could do Adobe Photoshop as well. And I have a video, I'm going to link to it below, that tells you how to do that. It's so easy, it takes you no more than 5 minutes, and I have the kids do it because that's the way you want to do it. So you'll have your kids select whatever image it is that they're going to use for their pixelated art, whether it's, you know, a soup can because they're doing something a la Warhol, maybe they're doing a portrait of themselves, maybe they're doing a portrait of someone famous like we did of Dr. King, whatever it is, have them find that, go to the computer, follow the directions in the video below, and you'll have a pixelated image. You want to get that thing printed out on color paper. It's really important. It has to be printed, or not on color paper, but in color. Color prints for this, okay? Once you have that printed color picture, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to get those kids to draw a grid over it using each pixel as a square, okay? And that's going to be helpful because what you're going to do is you're going to make that grid, and then I hope you can see this. I've got pictures online too, but we actually numbered it like A, B, C, and then 1, 2, 3. So you have like a real grid where you can find out where certain Skittles are located, okay? Then they have to make a grid of the same proportions out of cardboard, and that's where that worksheet that I've given you, which again is also below, that's where that comes into play, because the kids need to map out what they're doing. And so this worksheet sort of walks them through how big is your piece going to be, what size cardboard do you need, how many Skittles are you going to need, how many bags of Skittles are you going to need, how much is that going to cost you, because we want the kids to get thinking about that, okay? So if this is like STEAM related, STEAM is always talking about like how much money are we spending to build this, because you know if you're an engineer or you're in construction, you know, a lot of times all those projects go to the lowest bidder, so you know that's something to get our kids thinking about. So they want to get everything gridded out on their big piece of cardboard, okay, and I've got a picture of what that looks like somewhere up here on the screen. I'll put it. You also, if you really wanted to go there, you could get the kids to get colored pencils or markers and go ahead and color the grid. And that might be a nice way to differentiate for students who might need a little bit of extra help. We were doing it fast, down and dirty in camp, and I didn't have time for all that. So I was like, you better pay attention to what is on your grid because you will mess up fast. When it comes time to have the kids get started, I just threw it at them. I said, okay, you have your color grid, you have your cardboard grid, you've got the Skittles, you figure it out from here. And I gave them hot glue and I gave them school glue because they're middle school students. My kids chose school glue, or excuse me, they chose the hot glue because that's exciting to them. Ian Sand's kids at Art of Apex, I believe, use school glue. I think school glue is probably the better bet in the long run. But it does, if it pools, like if it's real wet and the kids make a big puddle of glue, which I mean, they're middle school students, so like that's what they're gonna do. If it pools, the color sort of bleeds out into it and it makes this like yucky, like bog of nasty. So the hot glue may be the better option for your middle school kids, but I let them pick because I really want them to be inventors and explorers and engineers. I want them to think about that. So they had the opportunity to pick, and then they had to start figuring out how do you get it down. And it was really funny. There were a lot of cooks in the kitchen at the beginning, but every single group came to the same decision. And so what they did is they have their piece and they would fold it so that they were only looking at the row that they were working on, right? Like right down here. And then one person would say something like, okay, we need 4 greens. One person would get the 4 greens, and then another person would glue them down in order, okay? And so they had like this nice little system. And if that doesn't really make sense to you, I have a I think it's like 15-second video, and I'll link it down there where you can go look at that and you can show your students if you want. I recommend letting them explore first, okay? Because that's kind of part of the excitement of this project, is figuring out how did I do that? Having ownership over, I figured this out and I conquered this project, I conquered this problem, and those are all great skills that our students really need today. Okay, so now you've finished these awesome portraits and you're ready to sort of wrap this thing up. So what do? One of the things that you really want to do is you want to seal it, of course, because you don't want your artwork to attract ants and have that kind of problem. I haven't sealed mine yet, I'm just going to be honest with you, but I went and I checked online and it looks like the artists who were making the Skittle portraits of Trayvon Martin were sealing theirs with plastic-based resin, and I was concerned that it might run the color a little bit the same way the glue did, the school glue. So I'm going to do a little trial run and I'll let you know what happens, but it looks like those artists have been very successful with that. I also had the suggestion of using like paraffin wax, which I think could work, but of course it might cloud your color a little bit. So that's, you know, something to think about. The way the students are going to finish this project is I have a worksheet I've put together called the Skittles Selling Your Artwork sheet, And what it does is it gets the kids to think about, how much do I want to be paid per hour as an artist? How much did my supplies cost? And what kind of formula should I use to turn a profit on my art? And that's, again, something we really want our students to think about, and that's a great career connection. I think, or I say this all the time, that I wish that more artists got MBAs, or at least went to business school, because so many of us do run our own businesses and it's a lot of trial and error. So maybe if we could begin to teach our artists for the next generation how to have these business skills, we would be doing them a wonderful service. Okay, so for my last thoughts on this project, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to grab some of the questions I saw you guys inundating me with across social media to see if I can sort of answer them. Okay, so the first thing that you guys were just asking me all the time was, how did you keep the kids from eating the Skittles? It really wasn't as complicated as you would think. I mean, I'm sure there was a kid like popping a Skittle here or there, but I never saw anybody do it, and then my kids love to tell on each other, and so nobody told me. In fact, the only issue I really had was one child took a few to peg a kid in the hallway with, which, I mean, that's just some outlier stuff. But what I did is I told them, I go, listen, somebody sorted this and they touched it with their dirty hands or sweaty hands. Other people have been using it, and we figured by the end at least 40 different hands had probably touched these Skittles. So what I did is I just sort of created a social stigma about eating the Skittles, that like these Skittles were really gross and covered with germs, and like, why would you put that in your mouth? And I had a few naysayers, you know, were like, oh, well, that wouldn't have stopped me when I was in middle school, or, you know, whatever. You just can ask them, and you have to be responsible and explain to them what a cool project it is. The other side of that is they knew on the last day of the project that they would get to eat some Skittles. I had little fun-sized packs, and I also had a big unsealed bag of Skittles that had never been touched so that everybody got to eat some. I just told them not to eat it, and I enforced it, and if they were acting wrong, they didn't get to participate in the project. So there you go. There will be Skittles like everywhere. Like, Skittles roll off tables. It is kind of crazy where the Skittles are. Just make it part of like your regular classroom practice while this project's going on, to just keep a broom handy, teach the kids to do it. There always seems to be like one kid who just like loves to sweep. God bless that kid. Thank you, kid, for being the sweeper. So even though we sorted all the Skittles out into these giant bags, my students found it easier when they were working right next to the project just to have like a little cup of Skittles. So, and the way I thought about it was, you know how you'll have like a big jug of paint, but you'll pour a little bit out onto your paint palette. That was basically what it was, and it made cleanup a lot easier, because instead of having like 5 bajillion million Skittles all over the floor, I had like 5 bajillion million orange Skittles in a cup that we could just pour back into the bag, and that was a really good way to do that. You know, the kids are working on their artwork, and they usually start from the bottom or the top and work their way down, or start from the corners and work in. So at a certain point, you're having to lean over the artwork, and if you lean on the Skittles artwork, it will crush the Skittles. It will sort of mash them around. If you make a mistake and you glue down the wrong Skittle, you just pop that Skittle off and stick the right Skittle down. It was no big deal. In fact, I had some students who sort of nominated themselves to be the quality assurance people, and they were going around and kind of double checking, almost like you would double check your math problem, hook it into STEAM. You know, so they would go around and kind of fix things, and some of them even like had modified tools, like they had pen caps that they were using. It was great to see how inventive the kids were. The purple colored Skittles will go the fastest, and the way I figured that out was, your purple Skittle is your darkest value. It represents black, and it also represents a lot of outlines. So that's what tends to go the quickest, at least for our projects. Now, you might do a portrait that has a lot of light values and you're using all your yellows, but for us it was definitely the purples. At the end, we were like picking up mashed ones up off the floor and sort of like, you know, reconstituting them and like gluing them down. So guys, I think that's everything I have to share with you right now about the Skittle project. It feels like it was so much. I hope it's really helpful to you. If you do this project, you should totally send me an email. You also should send an email to Ian Sands of Art of Apex, because he's the original brainiac behind this project. You should definitely visit his blog and check it out, because it's not just Skittles that are happening in Art of Apex. Amazing things happen in Art of Apex. I wish I was a student there. You're gonna wish you were a student there. So go check him out, and thanks so much, and I can't wait till I get to share the next video with you.